It was the 24th of September, 1940. A British lieutenant takes off his uniform without thought and dives into the freezing sea, risking his life to save and rescue an inexperienced Bf-109 Luftwaffe pilot who had crashed into the sea and was crying for help. Please watch the entire video in respect to those who lost their lives for the day we're living today. High above the frosty clouds at 20,000 feet, 34-year-old Flight Sergeant Frederick Dilfey was in his Messerschmitt Bf-109 alongside his formation of 100 bombers and fighters, heading towards Britain. Many of the pilots alongside him were new recruits with little experience just like himself, but were drafted in for a last-ditch effort at defeating Great Britain. Word had spread to the RAF that the Luftwaffe were rapidly approaching, and a squadron of 20 Spitfires and 40 Hurricanes were immediately scrambled to intercept the German planes. Although outnumbered massively, the inexperienced German pilots and their 109s were no match for the British aces in the Supermarine Spitfires and Hawker Hurricanes. The RAF realized that the Germans were much higher, and so a plan was formulated to surprise attack them from underneath. The clouds were thick and dark. The Luftwaffe could not see the Spitfires or the Hurricanes approaching below them. Frederick was soon nearing the coast of Folkestone, a port town in Kent, southeast England. Suddenly he sees two silhouettes within the clouds. They were barely visible, but due to lack of experience, he didn't think much of it. It was a pair of Supermarine Spitfire aces from the number 72 squadron, flown by Flight Lieutenant Crosby and Sergeant Glue. Before Frederick could react, they opened fire, pelting his 109 with 20mm shells, setting his Daimler-Benz 605 engine on fire. They were coordinated and precise with their shots. Frederick put his wounded 109 into a steep spiral dive to get away from the attacking planes, but with a damaged engine, it was difficult for him to obtain any separation from the Spitfires. His smoking engine was barely running, but his 109 was still capable of combat. The Spitfire comes in for a second attack and opens fire at his fuselage, taking out several control cables and hitting him in the shoulder with a 50 caliber round. He was rapidly losing blood and was in pain, but doesn't give in. The stricken 109 was now barely capable of flying, but he attempts to land it on the beach. On the ground, Lieutenant Maurice Jacobs watches the torn up 109 barely skim the cliffs and head right towards him. He ducks for shelter as the plane swoops over his head. Frederick's 109 still had a functional undercarriage, but it was too late. They couldn't be fully deployed. He had far too much airspeed from the dive down and misses the beach completely. Frederick crash lands in the icy sea and breaks his left leg on impact. He had survived, but now he faces the treacherous English Channel without his leg and an arm, whilst also losing blood. His chances of getting out were slim. Meanwhile, the Spitfire that had downed him, piloted by Lieutenant Crosby, comes in for a flyby and sees that the 109 had been successfully shot down into the sea. He salutes Frederick, and with a farewell burst of machine gun fire, the Spitfire returns to take down more German fighters. Frederick could not swim due to his injuries. Frightened and stranded in choppy enemy waters, his life begins to fade away. As a last-ditch attempt, he begins to wave his arms about and scream for help. Back on the shore, Lieutenant Jacobs watched as the German airmen cried for help. He could tell that Frederick didn't have long left as his voice had started to fade. He immediately asked his men, Sapper Evington and Lance Corporal Cook, to help him bring back the downed German pilot. Without thought and without any equipment, they strip off all their uniforms and dive off Folkestone Harbour to rescue Frederick. Several Messerschmitt 109s came over as they tried to get to the crash site. They expected to be strafed and killed in the water. Thankfully, several Hawker Hurricanes chased the 109s further out to sea and also downed them. Jacobs and his men almost lose their lives to cannon fire, but they were determined to carry on. He mentions that from the shore, the crash site didn't look too distant to swim, but they soon found out that it was much further than anticipated, and all three men were very tired when they reached the German 35-year-old flight sergeant. At first they thought he had died from the cold and pain. However, he was still alive, just unconscious. Frederick was 6 foot and weighed 15 stone, a very large dead weight. They managed to keep him afloat until a nearby fishing smack arrives. All three men struggle to lift the heavy Frederick into the boat. A little while later, he opens his eyes and immediately begins to smile. Jacobs remembers seeing how happy Frederick was to be alive, but he had absolutely no idea how he had been rescued. Nearby, he sees a soldier pass with a shovel full of burning coal, which startles him. Jacob saw that Frederick had a broken arm and leg, and began tending to his wounds with bandage. Although in excruciating pain, the German pilot kept smiling with various gestures, something Jacobs wasn't used to from the Nazi prisoners he had dealt with before. Frederick begins explaining in German what happened to him. He mentions that 2 Spitfires got him and that their shooting accuracy was the best he had ever seen. The first burst caught his engine and the next caught his control cables on the fuselage, whilst also hitting his shoulder. Pilot Frederick Dilfey, with a cheerful smile, whispers, and I quote, "We know your Spitfires are too good for us." They all share a moment of joy and laughter, as friends, instead of enemies, even during the worst of times, that was the Battle of Britain. Only 6.9% of you guys watching this video are subscribed. Subscribing to the channel is free, and it massively helps get towards the 100,000 subscriber goal for this year. So please consider subscribing, we are halfway there. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, or if you didn't, the dislike button, and leave a comment below on your thoughts. A huge thanks to our patrons for funding the channel, allowing me to make these videos through these rather rough times. If you would like another mysterious story, check out my video on the cruelest B-17 Ghost Fortress that landed itself. Thanks for watching, stay safe.